Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron,
And I'm Brett.
and you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door, or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins.
This week we're talking about episode 3, Adar, the episode where the title character gets about 3 seconds of screen time. But we get to visit Numenor. We get to see more of the Harfoots. We don't get to see any of the dwarves, which is a darn shame. But I feel like we get a lot of stuff going on this episode. Stilson, how are we feeling overall about episode 3?
Yeah, episode 3 for me was exciting in many ways, also leaving you at the end thinking, where are we going? We still have nothing. I mean, a lot of things were revealed, but also the main story, right, for the viewer is who the heck is Sauron? That's
And
what.
after episode 3, we're still asking who the heck
Yep.
is Sauron.
Yep. So I guess that's my episode 3 in a nutshell.
There's only so much character development that can happen on a raft in the ocean. And thankfully, we have been rescued from the raft and we are taken to the westernmost point of mortal civilization, the island kingdom of Numenor. And we're
Amen.
excited to get into it. Although maybe not worthy of 7 episodes worth of time, but it's exciting.
It is, actually.
You're a fan of Numenor.
Yes, but I agree with you that if you are limited to 8 episodes in a season, there should be a lot more progress made.
We'll get into that next time.
Yeah, so we were going to talk about Elrond and Elros first, but maybe let's talk about our good, bad, and great. Kind of give a splash of all the different things we saw in the episode. You good with that, Brett?
I love it. You want to start us off this first?
So I'll go with my good first. So my good was, even though it was short, as Brett said, the presentation of Adar I thought was well done. There's an obvious reverence from the orcs for Adar. We know that the word Adar means father, right? And then also when you see him walking through the tunnel out to meet the lone surviving elf now from the watchtower. He's got
it, block, or else he would not have survived.
Seriously, it shows one gauntlet on his hand, and you notice that it is the exact same style of gauntlet that you see Sauron wearing in the Lord of the Rings movies. So again, just great details that add into the, what they're trying to build this first season into, of everybody's on the edge of their seat. Who the heck is Sauron?
And the elves that are there, they're convinced, right, that this has got to be the successor to Morgoth. Like, there's no doubt in their mind that this is Sauron. We know that Sauron has many names, and this could definitely be one of them. They're convinced this is Sauron. And as a viewer, I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, yeah, who else would be Lord of the Orcs?
Yep. Who else would be? Where else would Sauron be at this point? Yeah. As far as my bad,
What else could it be?
Yeah, what else could it be? I did not like um, the saying of the Harfoots, nobody goes off trail, nobody walks alone. I think we're gonna get to this later, but uh, it's just what's the right word for it? It's not an oxymoron, is it? Maybe, but kind of like
It's
it's
certainly
ironic
ironic.
at least. Yeah, it's ironic at least. That nobody goes off trail, nobody walks alone, except for this list of 52 plus people I'm about to read to you who got off trail and walked alone and we left behind. Anyway, we'll get to that later. What was your bad, Meekum?
Do I not? I want to talk about my
Oh,
good
yeah,
first.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Oh,
No,
I
it's
forgot. I'm sorry. That's my bad.
no, no. Why don't you just go with it? Finish off your list. Go with the great.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so my great was the visions of Numenor is what I wrote down, but what I mean is just how Numenor was represented in the episode. It totally brought I mean, when you watch Lord of the Rings, you get hints of this great majestic kingdom that used to exist. These fallen statues, um, some of them are still standing, obviously. Minas Tirith is still standing,
Which
but
is like the gem of Middle Earth, but even in Lord of the Rings, it's like this is kind of a rundown, crappy place.
yep, even yeah, right. Even at the time in the Lord of the Rings movies, you can tell that it's a bit decrepit. It has seen better days. And finally, in the presentation of Numenor in this episode, you see, okay, this is like the height of that civilization. Like this is where all of those people came from, descended from, right? The kingdom of Arnor and Gondor. I thought they did a great job. It totally connected it to the ruins that you see in Middle Earth in Lord of the Rings, and brought back a lot of the great nostalgia, and was obviously also visually pleasing. So
I love that we get out of the Middle Age European setting of Middle Earth and we see this ancient height of technology, height of science, height of philosophy, civilization. And it's like the best of the Egyptians and the Greeks and Babylonians. The CGI looks amazing. It doesn't look fake. The large panovers over the city. And I think as a tease for the next episode, the Great Wave, where we get to see, a vision of the destruction of Numenor. I think that's really exciting, and the reason it's so great is because it looks so good, like you said, Stilson.
yeah, that's a good comparison. I never thought about that, but very true. The Roman Empire dissolving and that part of the world devolving into the Middle Ages. Very similar to what we see from Numenor to, in this episode to Gondor and Arnor in Lord of the Rings.
Those are great, Stilson. I think this was an exciting episode. Kept your attention. We know you hate the Harfoots. I agree that was quite a shocking bad that you had. That was good. We'll talk about that later. Okay, my good. The fight scenes, particularly, well, this one wasn't really a fight scene, but the water ration scene at the beginning with the elves digging their tunnels, and Orc comes out, and there's this test of mind. They're offered water, and first two elves, including Arondir, take some water, and you're watching it the whole time. You're like, what is going on? There's no way that they're offering water to the elves. And you find out that whoever the third person was is going to get sliced You see the slit on his neck just barely start to open up, and you see him fall. The only reason that isn't great for me is because they kind of play it out a little long. It's a little dramatic with the slow motion over a guy that we have no idea who he is. If it was like a main character, it'd be more impactful. I still thought it was great. And then the bar fight, which I think we'll get into later. Halbrand freaking does work on these Numenorians who are supposed to be like superior giants of men in every way, and Halbrand just wrecks them. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, it's interesting that that is never questioned. That this lanky low man southerner is able to quickly and decisively take out an entire band of Numenorians. And yeah, I thought it was clever, the scene with the orc and the elf. I just find it hard to believe that an entire squadron of elves is so easily imprisoned and put to slave labor.
That's right. Where did the rest? We saw a Rondir on screen get captured, but what about the rest of them? Did they all decide to go down some secret tunnels? My bad. I thought this episode was actually full of really clunky dialogue. I can understand some of the criticism the show got because of the dialogue. I don't know why it really stuck out. Galadriel and Halbrand are sailing in, and they're talking to Elendil on the ship. And Galadriel, I wrote it down because it just really bugged me. Galadriel says, "To what port do we sail?" "See for yourself. We're nearly there." Thanks. No answer. Halbrand says, "Nearly where?" Like, and then Elendil says, "Home." Great.
Right.
Thanks for the info. Then the next
We all know where we're going. It's 2 seconds away. Just say the name.
The next line we hear is Halbrand looking around at all the statues they're sailing through, and he says, "What is this place?" And now look how long it takes for us to get there. Galadriel says, "There is only one place it can be. The land of the sun, the westernmost of all mortal realms, the island kingdom of Numenor." It's like, holy cow, it took us a while to figure out where the heck we were. A little dramatic, and I understand why they do it. But
yeah,
there was something else. The Queen Regent says something like, "My grandfather's great grandfather." Like, okay, that was something. There was some, and it's always Galadriel, and I think it's just the fancy elf talk that they do. And it kind of gets on my nerves, and for whatever reason it did this episode.
Yeah.
My great.
Okay. Yeah, what's your great?
This one's a surprise. I didn't put it down there because it's actually the greatest waste of film time I've ever seen in my life. Is the 3 minutes of slow motion horse riding on the beach where we're getting zoom up close. Yeah. Nostril. We've got Galadriel with the dorkiest grin on her face, and we're just showing that for minutes at a time. And I'm like, this is such a waste of time. What is, for an episode, you've got limited time, and we're spending quality seconds on this.
So wait, just to be clear, this was your great?
This is great in that it is the greatest waste of time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's actually a great bad. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
There were great. Right. I had to call that out. That was so cringy. It was awful.
Yeah.
Go back and watch it again. Some of the shots of Galadriel's grin, it's just.
Oh no! Yeah, everyone saw that, and everyone was cringing, if not on the outside, at least on the inside. Like Brett said, it's where we're going to stay for the next majority of this season, and it is an important. It's an important aspect to this time and the story, but some of the things like we mentioned kind of when we introduced this podcast, we kind of want to delve in just a little bit deeper to some of the names and places that are thrown around. If you were like us when you saw it the first time, maybe not all of those clicked in your mind as to what they were and what they meant. So a character is introduced in this episode named Elros. You find out that he's the brother to Elrond. So these two have a bit of a family history, and at first you may be wondering, like, well, where is Elros? Like, did he die? Because Elrond is over there. Why isn't he, with him? What's going on? Actually, Elros is a man, not an elf. And how did that happen?
That's exactly what I was
Um,
thinking. How does that happen?
Elros was the first king of Numenor. So when Numenor was brought up out of the sea by the Valar as a reward, Galadriel mentions this in the episode, but as a reward for their valor in the fight against Morgoth, Elros becomes the first king of Numenor. And he and Elrond were both born half elf, half man. But also, their father was half elf, half man. And yes, when you read the Silmarillion, you wonder how can both be half elf, half man. I'm not sure how that math checks out, but that's how it's written. Each of the three of these people are given a choice by the Valar. Do you want to be a man or do you want to be an elf? Like, do you want to be a full-blown elf or do you want to be a full-blown man? And Elrond and his father choose elf. Elros chooses man. So that's how that all gets established. A little bit about like how they became special enough to get the attention of the Valar in the first place. Their father, Arundel, was, like I said, half elf, half man at the time of the story I'm about to tell, but there was a Cimmeril recovered from Morgoth during the First Age, and the elves and men that were fighting the armies of Morgoth were on the brink of losing and needed some aid from the Valar. And the Valar kind of had an attitude and a policy at this time of, the elves have disrespected us and have gone astray, and so we're going to kind of leave them to fight their own battles if they're going to act that way. And the elves were a little too proud, even on the brink of destruction, to ask for the what's that? Yeah, shocker. But also men have the same problem, to ask for help from the Valar, and there was this one man, the father of Elrond and Elros, that decided in a very selfless act he was going to try and voyage across the Sundering Seas, get to Valinor, try and plead with the Valar using the Cimmeril as, some sort of token of friendship or treaty or something like that, a peace offering, and see if he could treat with them to come to their aid in the fight against Morgoth. And long story short, the Valar accepted and ended up sending him with the Cimmeril into the sky, and it can be viewed even into the Third Age, as we read in Lord of the Rings, as a star. Brett brought up the reference to the Lord of the Rings connection. Brett, what was that you were talking about earlier?
When the Fellowship, excuse me, when the Fellowship are about to leave Lothlorien, Galadriel gives them all gifts, and the gift that she gives to Frodo is this vial full of light. She says, "This is the light of Erendil, our most beloved star. May it be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out." Of course, that comes in handy when Frodo's in Shelob's lair, although unfortunately he kind of gets stung and left out to dry anyways, so didn't really help a whole lot, unfortunately. But
yeah, and at the time you don't really know, like, Light of Erendil. All right, they throw random names out all over the place anyway, so obviously some random person. But now we finally get a connection to who that was and who she was talking about. So anyway, there's a little bit of the family history of Elrond and Elros. Elros is in fact dead, not because he was killed, but because he was a mortal man.
Probably plays into the feelings of the Numenorians having their first great leader be a mortal man. It makes you wonder if they take great pride in their mortality and their disdain for the elves.
Well, and you can also kind of see the connection to the elves in that Elros was half elf, half man, and probably was, culturally speaking, more elf than man when he became king of Numenor.
So some interesting dynamics at play for a couple centuries by the time we get there.
Right. All right. So the other family history thing that is going on in this episode is you're introduced to Elendil, Isildur, and his sister brother. I say that because in writing, Elendil only has 2 sons, at least as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but the sister is a creation of this series. And the brother, sounds like he has a brother who exists in this series, but is thus far unnamed and unknown about, what he's doing, where he's at. All we end up finding out in the series is that the brother had an obsession with going to Middle Earth. So, can we assume he's in Middle Earth? Maybe. But all we do know is that he's gone. I don't think Elendil is super pleased with that decision, at least not at this time. And also we find out that they have lost their mom and wife, and that it has obviously caused a lot of pain in their family, and in an effort to heal some of those wounds, Elendil has encouraged Isildur to basically join the Navy.
And if I can just
Yeah.
jump in, this is exciting as viewers, right? Because we get 2 more characters that are in the Lord of the Rings and that you see in the movies. This is Elendil, who's the king during the last alliance between men and elves against Sauron at the end of the Second Age. Elendil gets killed by Sauron. Isildur picks up Elendil's sword, smites off the ring from Sauron, and destroys Sauron, but then fails in destroying the ring and is basically the fall guy for the entire Third Age of Middle Earth.
And they are all on the island of Numenor together right now.
Bom, bom,
Yep.
bom. I love that Halbrand at one point even comes up to Elendil and gives him a little bro hug. And that's their first interaction. And
Right.
give it 1,000 years or so and he's going to be killing him.
So what we're probably about to find out is, well, we already did find out in the episode that Elendil is a descendant of a royal line of Numenorians, right? He's also from the west end of Numenor, which seems to have a little bit friendlier attitude towards the elves. A little bit more traditional culture, probably.
Because they're
And
closer to Valinor, right? Is that the reasoning? They're closer to Valinor being on the west side?
that very well could be. I think that there is talk that you could sometimes see Valinor from the west side of Numenor. So yeah, very well could be. The argument there being everyone else on the island of Numenor is out of sight, out of mind with relationship to Valinor. So yeah, that's valid. We'll find out, I'm sure, in the coming seasons that Elendil, and you know this from Lord of the Rings as well, just like Brett said, but Elendil becomes basically the foundational king of the big kingdoms of men in Middle Earth. So the two kingdoms that are started under him are the kingdom of Arnor and the kingdom of Gondor, each to one of his sons. And these are mentioned in the Lord of the Rings, though the kingdom of Arnor has fallen already and the kingdom of Gondor is on its last leg. Those terms should not be too strange, hopefully, but that's kind of the family situation with them. Brett, what do you think is the purpose of the sister in the series? Like, why did they create her? Is she gonna be the fill-in for the brother Anarion, who goes on to be the king of Arnor, or are we going to meet that brother later?
I think we're going to meet the brother later. I think we'll meet him in Middle Earth. I actually had the thought there seems to be a close relationship with her and Isildur. I think she may have some say. I think it'd be really cool to see her kind of help shape Isildur's, and we're already kind of seeing it, his kind of rebellious, bratty side, kind of go against the tide, go against the flow. Maybe she sticks around and plays an important role in bringing this Chancellor Pharazôn to power, which we know this Pharazôn character comes to power and ultimately is one of the big reasons why Numenor is destroyed. Which I can't wait till we see that. I don't know. I'm not upset by her, by some people, like some people are, but I do hope that she has an important plot point to the story.
Yeah, speaking of Pharazôn, what do you think about just the political atmosphere on Numenor right now?
Oh, they're divided,
Period.
aren't they? Well, maybe they're not divided, but they are in trouble. I think it's concerning, if you're seeing the whole picture, that you've got an exiled king, you've got his daughter, who is the queen regent, who is playing up to the people, but then she goes back at the end of the episode and tells her father, who we find out is some sort of seer, that, oh, the elf is here, it's happening, it's, the end is coming. So she's obviously got loyalty to her father still. So she feels conflicted. Pharazôn seems like just a complete loser.
Yeah, and you're left wondering, like, who's in charge? Is it the Queen
Yeah.
Regent? Is it the Chancellor Pharazôn? Also, if they banished the king, but the queen is accepted, then what's going on at the end when she goes to talk to her father, the king, as if they are, like, on the same side? Is it collusion at that point? Is it something else, So a lot of questions are being raised at this point, I feel like, and honestly, some of them get resolved, some of them do not by the end of this
No,
season. That's going to be
no.
a big part of the following seasons, whether it's 2 or 3 or whatever. But yeah, you are left. I mean, it's obvious that Pharazôn is the champion of the movement that is anti-elf, right? Because the Queen Regent's father was pro-elf, and Pharazôn is now the one in power, even if he doesn't have a royal title.
He gives a rousing speech next episode, which I'm excited to talk about.
Right.
Basically every anti-immigration speech you've ever heard.
Yeah. So where do you think this anti-elf attitude comes from?
I don't know, right? Because even Galadriel, she shows up and she's like, I don't know, but I think we're about to find out why. But as is the case, she is wrong again, and we don't find out anything. As someone who's hailed as like the wisest of all elves, man, she got quite a few things wrong. early on.
She was hailed as the wisest of all elves in the Third Age.
That's right.
And there's a few factors that contribute to that. A few thousand years, being one of them. There being a lot less elves being another one.
And a whole lot of effective learning experiences.
Exactly. But yeah, it is interesting. I don't really know. Obviously, there's a piece of pride, right? I think that there's a little bit of, we're done submitting to the superiority of the elves, and we did this. It wasn't them. They're not better than us. We're every bit as good as they are. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. If I might just say, I think something to look out for. The Queen Regent gives Elendil a task to basically keep an eye on Galadriel. They end up striking a friendship and a connection. Oh, he speaks Elvish. But she gives him a sword, and the camera zooms in on this sword. And I think we need to look out in future seasons. Is this the sword of Elendil that eventually is used by his son to slay Sauron, which is then kept by the elves for an age and reforged into Narsil and used by Aragorn? I think it'd be cool if we got our first peek of that in this episode.
Yes, as soon as you heard he was Elendil, I mean the almost the only connection to the Lord of the Rings movies is immediately in your brain you hear the words "the Sword of Elendil," and immediately you're like, "Where's the hilt? Show me the hilt."
Yep. And I was very pleased with his character. I thought he seems very kingly, even though he's got a ways to go to get there.
Agreed. And as you see later on in the season, the connection between him and the Queen actually softens and blossoms. I think that will only help him become the future king in Middle Earth.
Yeah. Well, let's head back to Middle Earth. Your favorite topic, the Harfoots. Say it for us again, Silson.
Yeah, they repeat it about 25 times in this episode. It's nobody goes off trail, nobody walks alone.
This was kind of the episode of call and repeat, right? The sea is always right. The sea is always right. Nobody goes off trail. Nobody
walks alone.
The Norris family, dad's broken his ankle. Great. They've got this awesome supportive community who's going to ensure that nobody walks alone. Nobody goes off trail. Unfortunately, as he said, if you're Daffodil Burrows who got surrounded by wolves, sorry, sucker, we're out of here. If you're a Miles Brightapple who got stuck in the snow, they're not coming for you.
You can definitely see the connection to the other halfling culture that we know of in The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits, where very what's a good way to put it?
Keep your nose out of trouble and no trouble will come to you.
Just think of Bilbo's birthday, where his speech is complete. Well, I mean, even before his speech, the preparations for the birthday party are all instructions to Frodo about how not to let anyone else take advantage of any possible, inheritance that they might get from Bilbo. And then in his speech, talking about how they're all just lucky to know him.
I don't know half of you, half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve.
Exactly.
Oh, old what's-his-face. You might have to edit this out too, Matt. What's the guy's name? Sadok.
Yeah, Sadok.
The leader of the Harfoot, Sadok, he gets up and gives his speech around the campfire. They're having their little fireside. And he says, now it is the time that we remember those who were left behind. We carried them in our minds and our hearts. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you carried them in your mind and your heart, but not in your carts. And it brings up this interesting conversation of, what does it mean to really care about other people? And yeah,
Exactly. And even with the broken foot or the twisted ankle or whatever it is, um, they just get done chanting their little ceremony of nobody goes off trail, nobody gets left behind, and then after that, also reading all the names of people who were left behind and how
we wait
sad it
for
is.
you. We
We
wait
wait for you. Yeah.
Oh,
But
they're gonna be waiting a while.
but if you got a bum foot, you're walking at the back of the line because we're not waiting for nobody.
We'll wait for you when we get there.
Yeah.
But we ain't going back again. We're not like
Yep.
Bilbo.
I think that waiting means something different to the dear old Harfoots than to everyone else.
Thank heavens for the stranger who kind of gets a bit of redemption this episode, and we see that he's like ready to help this family, and he's going to help push the handcart, and so that's a feel good moment. It kind of takes the target off his back for a little bit. Let's move on to our last topic of the day, and it's Halbrand in Numenor. And this is exciting. We know that Halbrand is Sauron for a couple different reasons. He is fascinated with Numenor, and he's quite excited.
I think that, like we talked about before we started, this was a great episode for kind of character development of Halbrand. And yeah, there's a few scenes in there that you get to see he has a temper, possibly. Maybe it's on purpose. He's got a serious obsession with the Smiths Guild, King of the Southlands, question mark. There's a lot of things that are brought to light, but also cause a lot of questions to be asked. Something that I kind of thought interesting, especially within the argument and answering the question of who the heck is Sauron, is Halbrand's obsession with the Smiths Guild. Like, you're wondering why he is so determined to get into this thing, especially if he thinks he's only going to be there for a couple of days. And it falls right in line with providing crumbles to those who can recognize them, that this guy is in fact Sauron, because as we know, Sauron also had a connection to Celebrimbor, right? The elven smith, in helping him think that he came up with the idea of the Rings of Power. And all of that stemmed from who Sauron, had previously taken on as kind of a mentor and teacher, which was Aule. So before he was Morgoth's little assistant, he was actually Aule's. And in working for Aule, as a reminder, Aule is the creator of the dwarven race. So if you kind of want to see the personality of Aule, you can see it in the interactions of the dwarven culture and what they specialize in and all that kind of stuff. So Sauron was kind of an apprentice to Aule before he jumped ship to Morgoth. And I think that that's why you see come out in him, first of all, even just the plan for the ring, the One Ring and the Rings of Power, and then why he is drawn to not only the Smiths Guild here at Numenor, but also to Celebrimbor in the Elven race as well.
So the big moment for Halbrand in Numenor is he has some bro time at the bar with his friends. He swipes the Smith Guild crest from one of his buddies, walks to a conveniently placed end of the road corner of town, gets surrounded by these guys, and they slap him across the face. He tells them not to. He says, please don't. They do it anyways, and then he unloads on them and promptly disposes of their threat and breaks a couple bones, smashes a few heads, and a pretty terrifying display of rage. I think we all probably felt like that was part of his character even when we first met him, but to see it, it was a bit terrifying. So my question to you, Stilson, is Halbrand, who we know is Sauron, up to this point, is he trying to be a better person? He says to Galadriel, like, I've found my peace, let me have it, don't ruin it, just let it be. I'm trying to make a better life for myself. Is he truly in this repentant stage, or is he just a bad guy?
I think that he is rethinking his methods. I don't know if his goal has changed.
What is his goal?
I think his goal is to rule the world.
Yeah.
And I don't think that has changed. You know, who he uses and how he accomplishes that goal is up for debate, probably because the orcs have just flipped him the bird. I don't think that deep down he ever lost sight of that goal. And I mean, you find out later, I think he was just trying to use Galadriel to accomplish that. And with the methods, he does kind of hint at the fact that he is debating change or whatever, contemplating change. I think maybe that just means he's going from a complete tyrant to maybe just a king. I don't know. But yeah, he definitely, at least in my mind, still wants to rule the world.
This is a point you brought up. Maybe you speak to it more, but speaking about his methods, we asked the question, has he at this point lied once to Galadriel yet?
Yeah, I thought about that as I was rewatching this episode. I don't think he has. I kind of paid attention to that, at least in this episode, pretty carefully, and he is an artful half-truth teller. And I don't think that he has technically outright lied. I think he has just been somewhat dishonest in his portrayal of himself.
The outstanding question, even after season 1 is completed, is what's going on with this Southland's talisman? Did he really take it off a dead man? Is he actually the king of the Southlands? Is he the heir to the throne?
Yeah, so the question is, like, I think that he addresses it later at the end, right? That I did take it off the dead man, the king that died, hundreds of years ago. And so you're left wondering in this episode, like, well, when you rewatch it, I guess, because you don't find that out till the end, but you're left wondering, has he worn it this whole time? Did it mean enough to him that he has been wearing this talisman since he picked it up?
Well, that's a good question.
Or was it just collecting dust in his desk drawer and he picked it out before he, got on the raft? And if he did that, does that indicate that maybe he had some kind of a preconceived plan that he, knew he was going to meet Galadriel out there? And from the get-go, it hasn't been this, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know, who I'm going to be. I don't know if I want to be the king of the world anymore like I was trying to be. Or has it actually been, no, I had a plan from day one of this series. This was what I was going to do. The moment I left the Southlands, I knew how, I already had a plan of how I was going to get back.
When we get a glimpse into a part of that plan and supporting this idea that he is a mastermind, that he did know what he was doing, when Galadriel finds out after her ridiculous horse joyride, that the sigil is not just a symbol, but it's a map depicting the Southlands, specifically what we know as Mordor. And I am ashamed to admit that it took me approximately 3 hours of viewing to realize that the Southlands was Mordor.
I believe it took me longer than that. So
I found out right along with Galadriel. And we know the destiny of the Southlands and the significance of that sigil in helping to create Mordor. So that's all been part of Sauron's plan. It seems like Adar and his orcs may have just been a hiccup in the plan. I don't know. I don't. Who answers a lot of these backstory questions for us.
I guess in my mind, I just didn't think that Mordor was not already a place like that was just in existence, and the orcs came into occupation of. Like, I think in my mind I had it that the volcano was there. It created this perfect environment. Sauron's magic probably riled it up a little bit more to get the plume of smoke going a little bit stronger, but other than that, it was probably just naturally occurring. So I think that's why it did not click in my brain until very late into this season.
Yeah, kudos to the team for putting that together, or shame on me. But
yeah, one of the two, or both.
Well, that's about it for episode 3, Adar. Like we said, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about Adar. It was mostly Numenor, but we'll see. We'll see plenty of Adar next in the coming episodes. Wanted to leave kind of with our theme, lesson learned of the day, and we talked about it. It was kind of hard to pick one because there was so much stuff going on. But still, tell me what you think about this. A theme that came up for me is this idea of who you offer and accept help from is quite important. Let me give you some examples. The Numenorians refuse to help the elf Galadriel. There's some tension there. The Southlanders and the Sylvan Elves despise each other. That kind of gets them into trouble in the Southlands when Adar and the orcs, who are working well together, take over. The Harfoots claim to look out for each other until they don't. We didn't see Elrond and Durin this episode, but we know that a lot's going to ride on that relationship and on how well they accept each other's strengths and how well they help each other. And in the end of this episode, we get Galadriel and Sauron himself teaming up and deciding to be buddies because nobody else will team up with them. And that obviously shapes the destiny of the show. So I don't really know what the theme is. I guess the quote of the week could be from Sauron when he says to Galadriel, he says, "You really expect me to leap with you back into the furnace?" And Galadriel convinces him to team up with her. To your point, maybe he's just playing with her and making her think that she's convincing him. But in either case, she's able to get the Dark Lord himself to team up with her, go get an army, and they're going to leave Numenor.
Does she get him to team up with her, or was that his plan all along? I think he's playing Galadriel like a fiddle. And yeah, those are actually really interesting points you brought up. It's the same in the normal world too, right? And it all comes down to, not to throw out the same term we've been throwing out all episode, but pride, right? If people just cared more about each other and what was right, then there wouldn't be this rivalry between the elves and the dwarves, or between those two and the men, and the Numenorians and the elves and all this kind of stuff. All of that division only helps one person and one effort, and that is Sauron and his buddies to take over the world and establish this orc kingdom that reigns supreme.
Yep. I always say we desperately need each other. As much as we get on each other's nerves, we desperately need each other. Take that with you. Think about it. Till next episode, thanks for joining us on the Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.